I'm Brandi Kruse. Coming up today on Undivided, our friend Jonathan Choe took a trip down to San Francisco, and what he saw actually makes Seattle look good for once.
These items are harming the users.
Correct. I call them suicide kits.
Is that some fentanyl you got over there? Is that the Fetty?
Plus, around 60,000 voters in Washington state failed to check a party preference in the presidential primary. So what happens to their ballots? And the New York Times tells us what we already knew about school closures. That and more coming up today on Undivided. Remember, you can support this show for just $5 a month by signing up at undividedpod.com. Welcome to Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. I'm Brandi Kruse. We're going to spend some time on the show today with our friend Jonathan Choe because we've been covering a lot of stories that he's actually been out on the ground covering. And he made a trip down to San Francisco, which we all know is a virtual hellhole, and maybe a glimpse at what Seattle's future might look like if we don't turn things around. And I'll say, what he reported back actually makes me kind of feel nice about where Seattle's at, like relatively speaking, obviously. So we have a bunch of stories to talk to Jonathan about. We'll get to him momentarily. I just had to mention this because we had such a to-do about these ballots that you had to, for the presidential primary, actually check a party affiliation, which this isn't the first time we've had to do that in Washington in presidential primaries, but a lot of people saw that and maybe they just didn't remember 4 years ago and they were like, I don't want to check my party preference on the outside of the ballot. But as we explained on the show, you had to. Because it is a party process in choosing a party nominee. Well, it turns out, this is from Fox 13, the Secretary of State's office says 60,000 people didn't check a party preference, which is kind of a lot. Now, they chalked it up to confusion, which I don't think is the case. Maybe a little bit of confusion, but to me, the ballot is pretty clear. And I tend to think that it's more so people who are like, look, I want to participate and send my ballot in, but I'm not putting my party on the outside of the ballot. So I tend to think that that's probably part of the reason. I never go with confusion because I feel like Democrats in particular always treat people like they're dumb. Like with the PSE energy rates, it's like, oh, if we listed the fact that the Climate Commitment Act is increasing gas prices on your PSE bill, you'll be confused. I'm like, no, I don't think it's confusion. I think people just don't want to do it. So we reached out to the Secretary of State's office this morning to figure out what's going to happen with those ballots. Like, do you have a chance to correct it if you want to? Which, again, I think most people are probably going to be like, no, I don't want it on the out. In that case, if you don't do it, it's not going to be counted. But this is what we got from Hobbs's office this morning. So they refer to these as challenged ballots. They said on the challenged ballots front, as of Tuesday, today, 54,499 ballots have not been counted solely because they lacked a party declaration. Another 2,600 lacked both a party declaration and a signature. So here's what you can do. If that was accidental, it says voters may cure those issues by contacting their county elections offices. There's a handy explainer nested within that dashboard about resolving ballot issues for your convenience. He says, I'm pasting it below, so he put it in there. So maybe you could put a link in the live chat.
Yeah, it's the Secretary of State.
Yeah. So
it's sos.wa.gov.
Yeah, so there's sos.wa.gov. So there's an option for you to cure your ballot. But again, if you did it intentionally, you just have to know that your ballot's not going to be counted. So maybe that was more of but that 60,000, again, my belief is that a lot of people just did that intentionally because they don't want to choose a party to participate. That's a lot of people who don't like that process. So, or who are just like, I'm not either party, but I do want to help choose a nominee. So just thought I'd update you guys on that. But if you want to look and see, hey, did my ballot get counted? Was it challenged? If you're like me, I track my ballot from start to finish because it's got the little thing on it. And you can go online and I track it to make sure it got counted. So you should always do that in any election. All right, I want to move on to an interview with our friend Jonathan Choe. So he obviously has been, I think, more than any other journalist, certainly in Washington state, but in the country, on the front lines of the homelessness and drug crisis. He's covered it extensively, not only in Seattle, but in places like Burien, for instance, which we've talked about on the show, and even over in Spokane, the extent of the homeless crisis. Well, he took some time last week to go to the city where homelessness has undoubtedly been the worst in the country, and that is San Francisco. I mean, San Francisco has reached depths of despair that we hopefully will never experience in Seattle. And so Jonathan wanted to, he'd been hearing some good things, politically speaking, about a little bit of a turnaround in San Francisco. So he wanted to go see things for himself. And based on some of the reporting he put out, things are still not looking good.
Harm reduction was originally designed in the 1980s as a way to keep people from getting HIV and AIDS through clean needle exchange. That narrative or that message has now been twisted into just supporting drug users in perpetuity, which includes now not just needles, but free crack pipes, free foil, free straws to smoke your fentanyl.
It almost seems like these items are harming the users.
Correct. I call them suicide kits.
Is that some fentanyl you got over there? Is that the Fetty?
Overdose death numbers are not dropping.
Every street.
Yeah.
There's people on the ground just laid out.
They're the same or worse. So it's clearly not working.
Totally passed out. So you put the pill in there already?
It's not a pill, it's powder. It's pure powder. It's called ISO. It's
Wow.
I think it's like 50 times stronger than fentanyl.
This, I had to help dig the bullet out of there.
That's a bullet hole.
That's a bullet hole.
America is falling away.
Why does this government, why do all these nonprofits still push this harm reduction?
It keeps them employed.
It keeps them employed.
It keeps them employed. It keeps them getting these federal and these government grants that employ them.
And how do you deal with this every day, sir?
Try to have some compassion, Everybody is capable or able.
Get that shit out my away from my car, nigga.
Okay. Let's just say, I didn't know we were going to drop the N-word there at the end of it, but that wasn't us, just for the record. Let's just say that it takes a lot to surprise Jonathan Choe, and his trip to San Francisco really shocked him. Again, that's saying a lot based on what he's seen in Seattle, but San Francisco, he said, was far worse. We want to have him in to reflect on that trip, but also to talk about some other local stories around homelessness that he's been covering extensively. Jonathan Choe, holy smokes, we have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, so much going on. I can't take a break right now. It's too much news.
Gosh. So let's just talk about a couple things that are happening now before we get to your visit to San Francisco, which I'm dying to hear about. So there is now a lot of anger in the city of Redmond over a housing project that's going to go in there that was rejected by the city of Kenmore, and Inslee called the leaders there feckless. So what kind of reception is this project now getting in Redmond?
Well, let's first start with the neighbors. The neighbors are absolutely furious because they feel like they weren't included in the process. They're accusing Mayor Angela Burney, the city council, the city planning manager, of essentially ramming this land transfer through. What they did a few weeks ago was they voted on giving this ideal parcel of land in downtown Redmond to Plymouth Housing, so this homeless housing provider, extremely controversial, can now put up a low barrier apartment complex. What that means is all these homeless residents now can essentially use drugs, and treatment and recovery services for addicts is not required.
So this is a familiar theme. I mean, going back a long time in Seattle where citizens feel like you aren't consulting us. Is this just like it's never going to be enough for citizens, they'll never get enough consultation, or is it genuinely like elected leaders don't care what they think?
Look, I don't want to start with conspiracy theories here, so I'll just tell you what I've been reporting on, what I've seen with public disclosure. It appears, again, that Mayor Angela Burney is getting orders from high above, and that's the Democratic Party. That essentially is King County Executive Dow Constantine. Dow Constantine has this health through housing initiative, and he's essentially trying to put a lot of these similar complexes all across King County and the east side. And as you referred to Governor Jay Inslee, the governor wants more of this stuff across Washington state as well.
Well, we need housing. I mean, obviously, and we need transitional housing and supportive housing and all of that. But the thing that really gets me is they've seen this fail when the community wasn't consulted. It failed in the Chinatown International District. It failed in Kenmore. What makes them think that they can just try another city and shove it through without consulting residents? And the blowback's not going to be the same.
Yeah, well, a couple things. I've definitely been covering the same story, it feels like, for the past few years in various communities. Number one, you're absolutely right. I want to be very clear. These residents are not saying they don't want affordable housing.
Yeah.
It's the type of affordable housing, because what they're initially promised is affordable housing for families, veterans, children. Who wouldn't want that? But it's this bait and switch at the end when it turns into actually it's low barrier, which means drug addicts can go inside, use, and the concern is it spills into the community and attracts crime. At the very least, the 911 calls, not necessarily just for crimes, but again, health issues, concerns go up, draining resources. Number two, I really do believe whoever's pulling the strings here, these elected officials who believe that this strategy works, they believe they can quietly push it through.
Not with Jonathan Choe.
Exactly.
Not with Jonathan Choe.
And I really do believe that it's this lack of accountability from the media for the past, few years prior to, just this coverage that I've been bringing now, with you amplifying these stories, that's now moving the needle to spotlighting this. Because at the end of the day, they don't want light on this. The elected officials don't want light on this because then it brings scrutiny. Yeah. Then they have to make changes potentially. They prefer to just ram it through, and that's what's been going on in King County for so long, but now neighbors are waking up.
Yeah, and I give you so much credit for this. And it was interesting to hear from the deputy mayor in Kenmore, Melanie O'Kane, when she told us what it was that clued her off that the bait and switch was going on. Because she'd been promised, family housing, and then she realized the floor plans were for like 1 bedroom. And she's like, what kind of family housing only has, 1 bedroom? And she was really kind of weirded out. And then she realized, wow, this is not what I was sold. Speaking of Melanie O'Kane, so she came on the show. People loved her because she announced on the show that because of things like this and being called feckless by the governor, she was going to be an independent. She's a lifelong Democrat. And she even wanted Inslee to run for president. That's how much she was in on Inslee. Then she came out and she said, no, I'm an independent now because of all this that's been going on. We also had, because of your coverage, we had on Burien Mayor Kevin Schilling on Sundays with Subscribers this week. And he also came on and he is speaking out against the policies of the Democratic Party. And he's a Democrat. What are we seeing happen here?
Yeah, I think people are waking up finally that it's this one party rule. At least when it comes to certain topics like homelessness, drug addiction, the policies are failing. They're just not working. And I think a lot of free-thinking Democratic elected officials now are realizing, wait a second, I've got to go independent because I can't go down with this sinking ship. Yeah. Brandi, these failed policies are going down. They're not going to work. I know some of these Democrats are trying to double down on this, but the data, the research, the investigations, all showing it's not working. So
Our own eyes show it's not working.
So now it really does come down to the voters. Yeah. Will the voters wake up and look at what's happening and, again, vote accordingly?
Yeah. On the show yesterday, I said it seems like voters are tired of Democratic policies. The only thing they're not tired of yet is voting for Democrats. It's like, well, you gotta find a switch in there.
Yeah.
But speaking of sort of, what happens if these leaders don't change course? You were down in San Francisco for a week, right? And I've always looked at San Francisco as sort of Seattle's future. What could happen if we don't do something? But then at the same time, there are elements of San Francisco and San Franciscans seem to be waking up a little bit. They had an election that had a couple things passed that would really clamp down on drugs, et cetera. What did you see when you went down there? How bad is it still?
Look, I was telling you before the show, I never thought I'd be saying this, but San Francisco, parts of San Francisco, like Soma, and especially the Tenderloin, which is just 5-6 minute walk, from City Hall, it's 10x worse than the worst scene in Seattle right now. And I've covered 3rd and Pike, I've covered 12th and Jackson here in Seattle, and it's awful in those places still right now. But San Francisco, I have never seen anything like this in an American city.
Holy moly, 10 times worse. In what regard? People doing drugs, crime?
People, all of the above. But imagine, you'll have a few people passed out at 3rd and Pike. In the Tenderloin, on one street, you'll have 20 people all passed out after smoking a cocktail of fentanyl, meth, cocaine, who knows what. People were openly showing me how they devised their pipes, the harm reduction tools, these meth pipes, the needles, and the fentanyl test strips they've been given, and they're putting it all together, mismashing drugs, and they're smoking it, and they're passing out. This is totally, people who are not just addicted, but people who feel like they have no purpose and meaning in life.
Wow. Yeah, and you also met with Tom Wolfe when you were down there, who we had on the show when he was up here. And, you know, he used to be one of those people in the Tenderloin, slumped over doing drugs, and managed to finally, through the Salvation Army, get literally salvation in his life. He told me when he was on that he thinks it's on the upswing in San Francisco. Could it be that it was worse? I mean, I imagine what he means is it was actually worse than it was when you saw it.
Well, yes. The short answer is yes.
That's a terrifying thought.
It is a terrifying thought that, again, an outsider comes in, and I can't believe it. This is an American city, yet Tom Wolfe is saying it was much worse. Look, if he's saying it's on the upswing, fine, it's on the upswing. Are there some promising signs, at least politically? Yes. The Mayor London Breed coming out recently saying harm reduction is not working. We can't just give out these meth pipes and, needles and fentanyl test strips without having any requirements anymore for at least some type of treatment or recovery. So from that regard, yeah, things are hopefully moving in the right direction. But again, there's a common theme in all of these West Coast cities dealing with a homeless crisis, a drug addiction crisis. It's failed public policies, and it just happens to be that it's all under progressive Democratic rule.
Yeah, and some of the things, what I found interesting about some of the videos you put out is it was people on the streets doing drugs who were telling you, why things had gotten so bad, and the policies and the money and the industrial complex and all of that. And I thought, wow, they even know. They even know
that jobs are tied to these industries.
Yes.
The homelessness industry, the drug addiction industry. I mean, there are people, unfortunately, who want this to continue. Because if they solve homelessness, if they solve drug addiction, then jobs go away. Six-figure, massive salaries for CEOs go away. So the people on the streets even know that.
Do you see the same failed policies in San Francisco as we have currently in Seattle?
Short answer is yes.
Yeah.
But again, I feel like Seattle is also headed in the right direction because I think the mayor and this new moderate council that he can work with is now saying enough is enough. We can't go with the current plan. We've got to move away from that. We've got to focus more on treatment beds. We've got to focus on affordable housing that actually has requirements. We can't just allow homeless encampments to stay on the streets anymore. We can't listen to the far left activist class. And that's another theme in San Francisco that was similar. You have this activist class that's been pushing these insane ideas, and some of these progressive politicians believing it and trying to implement it.
Well, hell, if Seattle is going to, make an upswing without hitting the rock bottom that San Francisco hit, that's a good thing. We all need to celebrate that and encourage that sort of move
really
in the
do.
right direction. How I guess, whenever I even come this close to complimenting a Democrat on like Kevin Schilling, it's like, hey, he's coming out, he's saying what needs to be said in the city of Burien. There's a lot of Republicans and conservative-minded people who are like, oh, they did this, da-da-da. How do we kind of convince even, diehard Republicans that, hey, you do need to sometimes give credit to reasonable Democrats who are willing to change course?
Yeah, I think, look, on the flip side, we keep on, knocking the Democrats because they just happen to be in power right now in Washington State by default. But you're absolutely right. I think there are now a lot of Democrats who are waking up and who want to, at the very least, go down the middle to the independent or moderate side. Mm-hmm. And I think Republicans also need to own the fact that, in many cases, they don't have the solutions either. Mm-hmm. I don't see that many Republicans right now with the answers, necessarily. So start working with the Democrats. Be open to that, to collaboration. And I think those types of avenues need to be opened right now.
Yeah, and I think Republicans have, a wish list, right, of things that they would want to do. And I think until you're in power and you're able to figure out can that be implemented or whatever it is, you don't know if it's going to work. And yeah, I feel like the Republicans should be wrapping their arms around these reasonable Democrats and been like, hey, the far left doesn't want your ideas. They think you're crazy. So you come over to us and we'll all fix this together. Your biggest takeaway from San Francisco?
It could be far worse for Seattle. That's sort of my takeaway. But, I think it's the encouraging sign is what Tom Wolfe says now that even the elected officials, some of them are starting to wake up in San Francisco and realizing the current plan is not working and they need to get out of this doom loop.
Yeah. How long do you think that'll take?
At least 5 to 7 years minimum. Wow. That's the best case scenario, in my opinion.
Yeah. Let me ask you about one more story before we let you go. This Bellevue landlord thing. Have you ever seen a protest like that?
No, and
Nuts.
I've never seen a story like this go viral, not just nationally, but globally.
Let me just give people context in case you didn't watch our show yesterday or you haven't been following Jonathan at Choe Show. So there's a a Bellevue landlord who rented a unit to a guy, and he hasn't paid rent in like 2 years, right?
Yeah, nearly 2 years
Yeah.
now. He's owed $45,000, this landlord, and nothing.
So the community just decided, let's just show up and try to shame him into leaving?
That's the plan, and there's going to be a protest every single Saturday at 11:30 in front of this house in Bellevue, every Saturday until Sang Kim leaves. And look, at the end of the day, there are a lot of Sang Kims out there right now in Washington, but really what's happening is the lack of accountability right now in King County courts. The court system is backed up, and this group called the Housing Justice Project, which is an arm of the King County Bar Association,
That's crazy.
is being allowed to represent people like Sang Kim when they're supposed to be representing low-income tenants who are genuinely facing unlawful evictions. And instead, the accusation against the King County Housing Project is the game plan is simply to delay, and get continuances for their clients, no questions asked. That's why guys like Sang Kim can get away, and that's why people like Jaskaran Singh, the homeowner, has to take matters into his own hands. This is borderline vigilante justice that we could get to.
Well, and just an update from our show yesterday, Sang Kim has successfully petitioned for an order of protection against the landlord, and he tried to get an order of
And he tried to
protection
get one
against you.
me.
So why you?
Well, he accuses me of harassing him, that my coverage led to people yelling at him, yelling at his kids in school, graffitiing his garage, throwing poop on his car. But I'm like, where's the proof?
Right.
Where's the proof of that? He has yet to show the proof. And I think that's why the judge didn't put a temporary restraining order on me.
But there is one on his landlord now who he's stealing from him for 2 years, and now the landlord has an order of protection. What is going on? The courts are out of control.
Out of control and upside down. And I talked to some legal experts, and they say here in Washington, especially in King County, if somebody asks for a temporary, restraining order like this, you'll likely get it.
Yeah.
And of course, there's a follow-up hearing now at the end of this month to sort this all out.
How many people have tried to file restraining orders against you now? Is that 2 or 3?
Oh, minimum, yeah.
Minimum.
Yeah. So,
Well, you better be careful. I might try to file one too.
par of the course, man.
No.
It is what it is.
Jonathan Choe, man, take a breather. Deep. Let's do it together. Ready? In through the nose. Ready, Jonathan?
I forgot what that was like, what that feels like to relax.
Maybe you can come to yoga with me sometime. It'll be great. Deep
I'll follow
breathing.
up.
Okay, thank you for all your hard work, and you're making such a big difference, and we just love to see it.
Hey, thanks for amplifying. These stories really need to get out.
Yeah, and for people who want to follow along,
Yeah. At Choe Show, CHOESHOW, primarily on X.
and fixhomelessness.org.
Yep.
Cool. Jonathan Choe, thanks.
Thanks again.
Did you notice that I tried to get him to take a deep breath, and he's like, that man needs a vacation.
I don't know
so
if he
bad.
does yoga, but he looked like me when you tell me to do that. I'm like, I don't know. I don't do yoga. How do you breathe?
Look, I mean, not everyone can be as in touch, with the universe as I am after
Or
doing
have
yoga
been for
like
3 months.
2 months, 3 months. I always do that to Mike when I get home. I'm like, I'm just feeling very in touch with my chakras or whatever. Anyway, Jonathan's awesome. Love that. We talk about so many of the stories he's covering. So every once in a while, like every month or two, we want to have him on and really go through everything. But I mean, the fact that San Francisco's 10 times worse than Seattle really speaks to the depths of that crisis there. And we've got to pull ourselves out of this train wreck before we get that bad. I mean, we're bad. Don't get me wrong. But comparatively, Jonathan Choe, there's no reason to lie about it. San Francisco is far worse off than Seattle is. And that is the ghost of Christmas is yet to come, except not Christmas, something far more disturbing than Christmas. Sorry, Nicole's like, stop with the references. But Ghost of Christmas. Anyway. All right, before we get to our next story, the Washington State Supreme Court has ruled that you don't have to pass the bar to practice law in Washington. I'll let you mull on the reason why. I'm sure 99.9% of you, before we get to the story, can tell me exactly why the state Supreme Court would say we can't force people to have to pass the bar exam to practice law. First, I've been talking about my success on the Eastside Weight Loss Clinic program, and I've heard about your success too. I'm down 37, almost 40 pounds. Jean says she's lost 28 pounds, went from a size 16 to a size 8 in pants, extra large shirt to a medium regularly in shirts. That's amazing. She said, as I've said before, I've tried everything to lose weight, and this has been by far the easiest plan I've ever tried with the best results. While the weight loss has been impressive, the way I feel has been even more impressive. She said, Brandi, I can't thank you enough for sharing your experience with Eastside Weight Loss and how well you've been able to maintain your weight loss, as this was one of the most important aspects of trying the program. We love it for you, Gene. If you would like to see the results that Gene has seen, that I have seen, you can get wonderful results in the program in just a month or two, and then you're looking and feeling better by summer. This is the best time to start it. Eastside Weight Loss Clinic program, eastsideweightlossclinic.com, eastsideweightlossclinic.com. Schedule your free 15-minute consultation. You can do the consultation virtually. You can do the whole dang program virtually. Never have to step foot in an office if you don't want to. All right. The Washington State Supreme Court has ruled, Nicole saw this at the tail end of our show yesterday. She's like, did you see this? And I'm like, that can't be the case. It was, unfortunately. The Washington State Supreme Court has ruled that the bar exam will no longer be required in order to become an attorney in Washington State. Let's talk about it in our segment, Unbelievable. Boop. All right. Before the commercial break, I asked you to really ponder on why the state's highest court would rule that we cannot require the bar exam for people to become an attorney. Anybody? Yeah, it's racist. It's racist. And that is the reason for so many other things that we see happen in this state. According to the Spokesman Review, the Supreme Court says bar exam will no longer be required to become an attorney in Washington State. The Bar Licensure Task Force found that the traditional exam, quote, disproportionately and unnecessarily blocks marginalized groups from becoming practicing attorneys and is, quote, at best, minimally effective for ensuring competency. There will be instead 3 experiential learning alternatives to the bar exam, each for people following a different path of legal study. The specifics, scale, and implementation plan for these alternative pathways have yet to be developed. But the Spokesman Review goes on to say, so essentially, okay, not a bar exam, but let's have these other experiential pathways toward, practicing law in Washington. It says law school graduates can complete a 6-month apprenticeship while being supervised and guided by a qualified attorney, along with finishing 3 courses. So a glorified internship. So like glorified internship will get you into practicing law. Law students can become practice ready by completing 12 qualifying skill credits and 500 hours of work as a licensed legal intern. Upon completion of those requirements, they would submit a portfolio of that work to waive the bar exam. Typically, students will complete an internship between their 2nd and 3rd years of law school, gaining about 400 hours of experience. Then, if they do about 3 hours a week of legal work through their final year of law school, students could have 500 hours of experience upon graduation, leaving the portfolio to complete before licensure. Lastly, law clerks can become lawyers without enrolling in law school by completing standardized educational materials and benchmarks under the guidance of a mentoring attorney, along with 500 hours of work as a licensed legal intern. Here's the thing. I get it, partially. I think there's a lot of things that historically, it's been like, oh, you've got to go to a 4-year school and you've got to do this and pass these tests that may or may not be an indicator of whether you'll actually be good out in the job market. We talk about that quite a bit. It isn't the actual consideration of alternatives and experience that could equate to what you might learn while you study for the bar exam. That actually doesn't bother me that much. I got to be honest. What bothers me is they're doing it in the name of equity. Because that, to me, is, what do we call it? What did Dory call it? The soft bigotry of low expectations. And that's what we're seeing in schools, where it's like, oh, students of color are underperforming, so let's just lower the bar for everyone, right? And in this, it's like, oh, we need to lower the standards and lower the bar. What? Because people of color are dumb? You don't think they can pass a bar exam? Is there anything to prove that theory or that narrative? So to me, it's just the soft bigotry of low expectations. And I also think when you get rid of these points of comparison, especially with something like a legal career, where, a lot of it is rooted in, have you studied case law? Have you studied the Constitution? Have you gone through, it's one of those careers where it's not like, if somebody wants to go to a trade school and become a mechanic. And it's like, an apprenticeship in that sounds good. Like, you go in there, you learn with your hands, you do this, but being an effective attorney really does require you to be studious. and to learn these things. And I wonder if apprenticeships and all of that, it gives you the real world experience, but is it going to give you the actual book knowledge that you do need to be an effective attorney? So that kind of freaks me out. And it's also just another dumb thing done in the name of equity by the state Supreme Court.
Right.
The state Supreme Court, people who have long legal careers before they wind up there are like, nah, you don't need the bar exam.
It's wild. I mean, I think about Jason Roth, who we talked to this week. He had a really great attorney that was representing him, or last week, whatever that was. Time flies, man.
I think that was Monday. No, it wasn't. Okay, last week. Yeah.
See? Anyway, but he had a really great attorney. He thought it was a really great attorney, but that attorney just didn't know. I mean, it's a tough job to stay up on all of these laws and how to maneuver them in order to get the best results possible for your client. And even a great attorney is struggling to keep up on all of these different laws. And so I think that, going in, you need to have the background of all these laws and not just the practice, because that background is what's doing it for you. And so if you're saying, oh, it's too hard to take a test, I can't study all that old stuff, I'm just going to do all the new stuff. Well, you're not going to be able to provide your client with the most, the wealth of knowledge you need to be able to manipulate the system, because that's what you're doing as a lawyer is making sure that the system is working in the most effective way for your client. Right.
And you make a good point. If you can't pass an exam as an attorney, but you're telling me that you're going to be ready to defend like someone who's facing the death penalty in court and all this stuff. So it's just this really weird, I'd like to see how these alternatives play out and whether these people are able to get jobs. Because do law firms want to hire these people who didn't pass the bar exam? Does a client? Do you as a client, if you know that your attorney and you're going in to fight for your freedom, that they haven't passed the bar exam, are you going to hire them? So I almost wonder if this will make these people they think they can pursue a career as an attorney, even though they don't want to take the bar exam, but then nobody's going to hire them. I did ask this of you guys in our daily subscriber show poll about this news. Would you hire an attorney who did not pass the bar exam? Now, a lot of you are saying no, but some of you dissented from that opinion. Diana says, I struggled with this and ended up voting yes. I think most people look at a lawyer's success rate. Of course, that's because all of them have had to pass the exam. However, passing the exam doesn't make you a good attorney, and it's separate from getting a law degree. Also, compromising the power of the Bar Association sounds like a good idea. Yeah, and I will say you do make a good point there, that there are a lot of bad attorneys who did pass the bar exam. And that is a good point. And you mentioned, Jason Roth, his first attorney, was really ineffective. So you can have slid through the bar exam and still be a crap attorney. I get that. But it's when you get rid of this consistent measurement of people and you can sort of gauge them, it's hard.
I just think you need the base of knowledge and then build on that as the laws change and things like that.
With experience in court. Matt Gilbert says, tinfoil hat time, change all public defenders to non-bar lawyers. They do a bad job. All convictions get overturned and no one goes to jail. I brought this up when I heard this because I said, couldn't you argue oh, my lawyer, I didn't have competent counsel, and so that's my basis to appeal because they didn't even pass the bar exam. I do agree, Matt. That's not tinfoil hat. That's reality. Danielle says, absolutely not. I wouldn't. The fact that this was even considered, let alone ruled okay by the Supreme Court is ludicrous and terrifying. Are we going to make it cool if doctors don't really go to med school too? Hey, doctor, you don't got to go to med school. You just learn on the fly. Get your hands in there. Get dirty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, terrifying.
I mean, I know somebody that didn't get accepted to UW and he has everything they asked of him. But he's a white kid from a white family. And
can't have
we're
that.
wait a minute. Are you accepting people based on merit or for something else?
And that's all it should be. With this stuff, especially, careers that are life or death for people, are deathly serious. It's no, I want a meritocracy. I don't want your weird identitarianism seeping in. People complain, there's all these planes issues, and people are always oh, that's what happens when you go for DEI and not the most qualified person. And also, it's offensive to suggest that, again, a person of color couldn't be the most qualified person
Right.
for a job. And so you've got to preemptively lower the bar for them. That's what Jeff said on Locals. He said, Brandi, how do people not see this as actual racism? All this is saying is that in order to include more BIPOC people in the legal profession, they have to lower the standard. Do these people even realize that they're implying that the entire BIPOC community is so stupid to pass an exam that has been the standard for generations? I agree. Couldn't agree more. Okay, coming up next, remember how a lot of us were pushing back against school closures and being vilified for it? People lost their jobs for advocating against school closures. People lost friends and, don't talk to family members anymore. We had an example of that on our show, which I'll talk about momentarily. Well, now everything's fine because the New York Times agrees with us. So we were all conspiracy theorists and terrible people, but now the New York Times is mainstreaming what we all knew to be true, which is that school closures were very, very bad for kids. We'll talk about that coming up next. First, if you are speeding toward retirement, which aren't we all? Aren't we all just waiting to retire? And we work hard for our retirement. We work hard to put money away. We work hard to invest money. And so it's important that that investment is protected against risk. Zach Abraham and his team at Bulwark Capital, they specialize in risk management. And 2024 is going to be a wild ride. Man, if there were a time to have a team that is actively managing your portfolio in a way to minimize risk, it is 2024 with the election, global unrest. So Zach and his team are going to have another free live webinar coming up. Again, you can join for free. It's going to be a 2024 outlook. It's Thursday, March 28th. And you can just listen to sort of their risk investment strategy, how they actively manage every portfolio, and how they always look for opportunities to lower risk, lower cost, and give you as much upside as possible. So don't miss Zach's free 2024 Outlook live webinar this Thursday, March 28th, next Thursday, March 28th. You can register now at knowyourriskradio.com. That's knowyourriskradio.com. Investment advisory services offered through Trek Financial LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. Investments involve risk and are not guaranteed. Past performance does not guarantee future results. All right, the New York Times is coming out with an analysis of the cost benefit for closing schools during the pandemic. This, first of all, I don't need a study to tell me this. I certainly don't need the New York Times to tell me this. I didn't need health officials to tell me this. There were so many people who looked at a lot of the things that we were doing during the pandemic, and common sense told us that they were dumb. Common sense told me when my husband and I were walking into an Italian restaurant that had a total of like 6 tables and one of them was 3 feet from the door, that having to put on our mask to walk 3 feet, sit down, and then take our mask off to eat our meal made no sense. Common sense told me that firing people over not getting a vaccine that we already knew would not slow the spread of COVID made no sense at all. And common sense also told me, based on everything we knew, and told a lot of you, that it was going to be more detrimental to kids who were in the lowest risk group to keep them out of school for long periods of time, and they were going to be set far, far back in their education. So, we had on someone named Jennifer Say. Do you remember this? She was about to be the CEO of Levi Strauss, like on her way to the top of Levi Strauss after a long career there. And she was living in California, and she ended up speaking out about school closures, saying, hey, my kids are going to public school. I think it's really bad to keep these kids out of school. She was shamed and ultimately forced to resign and leave her job at Levi Strauss. They offered her $1 million payout if she'd leave and just stay quiet. And she's like, no, screw your $1 million. I believe that school closures were bad. And so to see articles like this in the New York Times, what the data says about pandemic school closures 4 years later, it's infuriating to me because it's like you look back at that period of time, even up until, I would say, months ago, people are still being vilified for this opinion that school closures were bad. And now all of a sudden, the New York Times is going to just share that opinion and everybody's going to normalize it. No one's going to apologize. No one's going to try to make things right for people like Jennifer Say. So again, the New York Times article, it's very long if you care to go read it. What the data says about pandemic school closures 4 years later. It says the more time students spent in remote learning, the further they fell behind. And experts say extended closures did little to stop the spread of COVID. Oh, you don't say. Interesting. 4 years ago this month, schools nationwide began to shut down, igniting one of the most polarizing and partisan debates of the pandemic. Some schools, often in Republican-led states and rural areas, reopened by fall of 2020. Others, typically in large cities and states led by Democrats, would not fully reopen for another year. A variety of data about children's academic outcomes and the spread of COVID-19 has accumulated in the time since. Today, there is broad acknowledgement among many public health and education experts that extended school closures did not significantly stop the spread of COVID, while the academic harms for children have been large and long-lasting. Does that sound familiar to you? Every narrative in there was a narrative and were narratives that were dismissed as dangerous throughout the pandemic. And I think it's interesting in that second graph where they're talking about, it was a polarizing and partisan debate. No, it wasn't a partisan debate. That had nothing to do with partisanship. People who were speaking out against school closures were speaking out based on just common sense and putting the pieces together of, hey, if we have our kids learning online and they're in a low risk age group, this is going to be more detrimental for not only their education, but their mental health. I remember people speaking out about, gosh, this is going to increase teen suicides. This is going to hurt their mental development, their social development. And it did. So no, it wasn't partisan, New York Times. It was common sense versus people who refused to employ common sense during the pandemic. And I'm going to eliminate the first 6 months of the pandemic from this whole conversation we're about to have, because I really do think a lot of people, we were all like, what the hell is going on? So I kind of give people a free pass and leaders a free pass for essentially the first 6 months of the pandemic. And then after that, when you continued stuff like this, as we learned more about COVID-19, it was not only dangerous, it was absurd. Okay, so let's keep reading on about the takeaways from this New York Times article. So big takeaway, the longer schools were closed, the more students fell behind. It said at the state level, more time spent in remote or hybrid instruction in the 2020-21 school year was associated with larger drops in test scores. Shocking. At the school district level, that finding also holds, according to an analysis of test scores from 3rd grade through 8th grade in thousands of U.S. districts. So that's not a surprise. Yeah. If you're not in school learning, you've got kids who've got a laptop and all these things dividing their attention at home, yeah, learning is going to go down. So another big takeaway, and this is also something that people who were speaking out against school closures said would be the case, that school closures would hurt low-income students and students of color the most, and those were just rejected. Well, here's what the New York Times says. Income and family background also made a big difference. A second factor associated with academic declines during the pandemic was a community's poverty level. Comparing districts with similar remote learning policies, poorer districts had steeper losses. Again, that was not a surprise. When you've got, let's say, a working class home where you've got a kid at home learning at their kitchen table, are their parents both working around the clock, working a couple jobs, don't have enough time to help them through the lessons that they're now kind of on their own to get through? Do they have good enough internet access? Do they have the tools that they need at home to learn from home? The same that a higher income family would have? Probably not. And that was just common sense. You could try to even the playing field by sending kids home with a tablet or whatever it is, but that's not going to do the trick. Let's see. Another takeaway from the New York Times. Closing schools did not appear to significantly slow COVID spread. Again, something that we knew very early on or suspected very early on in the pandemic. And something that was dismissed outright as dangerous rhetoric. It says it was largely unknown in the spring of 2020 when schools first shut down whether it was safe to reopen schools. But several experts said that had changed by the fall of 2020. When there were initial signs that children were less likely to become seriously ill, and growing evidence from Europe and parts of the United States that opening schools with safety measures did not lead to significantly more transmissions. They knew that in the fall of 2020. Yet you still had people who were vilified for saying that because they're not the New York Times. And until the New York Times says it, and until Democrats say it, it's just a conspiracy theory. Now, there was one aspect of this New York Times article that I hope we can all agree on, and that I hope will prevent this from ever happening again. And that is that we have to look at that period of time as a learning experience. The New York Times writes, pandemic school closures offer lessons for the future. Though the next health crisis may have different particulars with different risk calculations, the consequences of closing schools are now well established, experts say. In the future, infectious disease experts said they hoped decisions would be guided more by epidemiological data as it emerged, taking into account the trade-offs. But I would say that's up to them to do. You know, for the New York Times to say, infectious disease experts hope decisions will be guided more by data as it emerged, taking into account trade-offs, they're the ones who weren't taking into account trade-offs. They're the ones who have to learn from this experience. They're the ones who have to admit that they were wrong. And to me, that's been something that's been lacking at all stages in this pandemic, particularly among Democratic leaders and among some public health officials at the government level, where they refused every step of the way to admit fault, to admit that they had a bad assessment, or to simply acknowledge that the information has changed, what we know about the virus has changed, so what we were trying to do, it doesn't make any sense, and we're going to pivot. I've said that a million times. All I wanted during the whole pandemic was for one leader to come out and say, we don't know what we're doing. That's all I wanted, because that was the truth. I wanted Governor Inslee to come out and say, this is new to all of us. We're going to make decisions based on the information that we have, and if we make decisions that are wrong, please give us a little grace and we'll change course and we'll go in a new direction. No, the governor was never willing to admit that their approach was wrong. He was never willing to admit that he was wrong on certain shutdowns, that he was wrong on vaccine mandates. I mean, he still hasn't apologized for firing. It's one of the things that made me sick, seeing the governor sitting there at the front row in the funeral for a fallen Washington State trooper. You got these troopers who are out there risking their lives for the state of Washington. And you fired some of them for refusing to get a vaccine that we knew by the time you fired them would not prevent them from getting or giving COVID. And he still has not had the humility to admit the error of his ways. So how am I supposed to believe that people will learn from what was done and what was clearly done wrongly? How am I supposed to believe people are going to learn a lesson when they refuse to acknowledge that they got anything wrong? Even in this New York Times, do you think New York Times in this went back to all its old headlines where it vilified people for sharing these opinions and said, hey, the New York Times, we were wrong too? Do you think any of the infectious disease experts they reference in this article are introspective in saying, hey, we got this wrong too, we need to do better? No, this is all about, it's as if, oh, we were saying this all along. We knew this. No. So unless you're willing to admit the error of your ways, I have zero confidence that the next time something like that happens, you're going to approach the situation differently. All right, quick, I want to play a clip of an interview from Don Lemon's new show, the one that was supposed to be on X. And then Elon Musk said, yeah, we're not going to put that on X anymore, because the first person Don Lemon interviewed for the Don Lemon show was Elon Musk, which kind of made sense because Elon Musk had made this big deal when Tucker Carlson came to X that, hey, we're open to all sorts of free speech. Don Lemon, because he'd got ousted from CNN, come over and do your show on X. So Don Lemon's like, okay, I'm going to do that. Sits down for an interview with Elon Musk, and then allegedly, after that interview, X says, yeah, we're not interested in partnering with you anymore. You can still put your show on X, that's okay, but we're not going to have it be sort of a business relationship, so to speak. And Don Lemon lost his mind over it and was, criticizing Elon Musk. So we're now starting to see some clips of this interview, and I'll give my assessment of it after, but here's a clip of Don Lemon talking to Elon Musk about the line between like free speech and allowing dangerous rhetoric.
We don't agree on this.
Yes, you want censorship and I don't.
No, I don't want censorship at
Yes,
all.
you do.
No, I want responsibility.
You desperately want censorship.
No, if I want a censorship.
You want censorship so bad you can taste it.
No, that's not true. It's not true. I think that there's right and wrong. And I think that when you have a platform that's as big as yours and as powerful as yours and as influential as yours, and you are a person of consequence to the world with what you do, that there is a certain responsibility that goes along with what you have on your platform and what you put out to the world. And I think that's important. You don't see that responsibility?
I think we have a responsibility to adhere to the law, and if people want the law changed, they should talk to their elected representative and get the law changed, and then we will adhere to the law.
Okay.
But if you want us to go beyond the law, that is us deciding to be censors.
So,
And I'm against censorship. I'm in favor of freedom of speech.
Yeah.
And freedom of speech only is relevant when people you don't like say things you don't like. Otherwise, it has no meaning.
Yeah, Don Lemon as an independent is the same as Don Lemon on CNN. I watching those clips, I knew why Elon Musk was like, we're not doing business with this guy. Don Lemon came into that interview locked, loaded, and ready to lecture Elon Musk. That's the worst kind of interview. And I've always had this frustration with certain interviewers that they're not coming in with any curiosity into an interview. Don Lemon didn't come into that interview willing to have his mind changed. And those are two of the most important things as a journalist, and particularly a journalist who does opinion. You have to have curiosity. That at its core is like you have to have a thirst and a desire to learn from other people. You also have to be willing to have your mind changed. And Don Lemon, he has neither of those things. He came in there wanting to put on a performance, because he had this new show, and he wanted to lecture to Elon Musk. He didn't actually care what Elon Musk had to say. It was more about giving his opinion and trying to suggest that whatever Elon Musk had to say was wrong and out of line. And so that's the Don Lemon from CNN. Just because you can take a person out, you can take the lemon out of the CNN, but you can't take the CNN out of the lemon. And it's interesting because after he did this interview with Elon Musk and he was on Twitter complaining that his contract with X or whatever got taken away, the first place that Don Lemon ran to? CNN. He went back on CNN with Aaron Burnett out front and played clips from his independent interview with Elon Musk. And so now CNN's all over the place covering what their former anchor that they Don Lemon talked about with Elon Musk because it was a CNN-esque interview. And X has I mentioned last week, we didn't know what the interview was like. And I was like, I hope Elon Musk didn't just get hurt and took away this contract because that goes against his whole free speech of all kinds. But I get it because Elon's like, we're not going to do business with some guy who just wants to lecture to us and doesn't want to listen and doesn't want to actually get out there and find information and have a thirst for knowledge. That's Don Lemon's shortcoming as a not only journalist, I use that very softly, but as a host. He has no curiosity. He's not answering questions to actually get information. He's not listening to listen. He's listening to speak. So it was just a really cringy interview, to be honest. Okay, coming up next, reading questions and comments. Yes, and then I have to set the record straight on something. Oh my gosh, because the internet thinks I'm a horrible person. And I just got to be clear on that. First, I've been talking about my friends at First Mark Insurance and just encouraging you guys to take the First Mark Challenge. Everyone needs insurance. If you are right now dealing with all your insurance on your own, you're shopping around, you're choosing insurance, trying to figure out a price and all that on your own, you don't have to. First Mark Insurance will do all that for you for free. They're a local company. They've been doing this a long time, and now is a really good time, an important time to have an insurance broker in your corner. Dave Taylor is the CEO of First Mark.
I really want to encourage folks, don't try to navigate this current market by yourself. I believe you need to get with a broker. Okay, obviously I'd love them to come to First Mark, but at a minimum they need to be with a broker that works with numerous carriers that can give them the advice they need and really help them navigate this right now because it's complicated.
Yeah, and especially when you can have someone navigate it for you who is local. They're going to pick up the phone when you call them, when you have an issue, and they're going to do all of that for free. So firstmarkinsurance.com, firstmarkinsurance.com. Schedule time to take the First Mark Challenge. You can do it virtually, and basically all you need to do is talk to them about your current insurance and your insurance needs and your budget. And they're going to go out, they're going to do all the hard work for you and come back with a plan. So firstmarkinsurance.com, they work for you. All right, setting the record straight quickly. I talked about my speeding ticket that I got going over to Eastern Washington over the weekend, which is a lot of fun. I was speeding, of course. People are like, how fast were you going? That's none of your business, okay? No. Should I say how fast I was going?
Well, I mean, the ticket itself says 5 over.
Yeah, the ticket says 5 over. So 5 over. Look, I even said I was going 91, okay, in a 70, which is too fast.
Chatting.
But I even told Nicole maybe a minute before that. I was like, or maybe not even that, like a few seconds before that. I was like, ooh, I'm going 91. And I was like, oh, and then I think it was too late. And I think he saw me. So I noticed, I was like, oh my God, I didn't even realize I was going that fast because that's too fast. But anyway, there were some news stories today. And the headline was, state troopers pull someone over going 161 miles an hour. This is from Trooper Thorson in District 3, tweeted out a photo of a state trooper who had a white Audi pulled over. It says, Tri-City troopers were working with our airplane this morning at an Interstate 82 and Locust Grove in Kennewick when they stopped this car for 161 miles an hour. If this car would have hit anything, we would probably be investigating a fatality collision. People, you know how many people I think jokingly tagged me in that, said, Brandi, was this you? For the record, that was not me. But I didn't even know cars could go 161 miles an hour unless they were like aftermarket souped up. Isn't there some sort of governor at like 120, 130? I've never tested how fast I could get my car going. 161 miles an hour is insane.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And if you really thought that might be me, I'm really glad though that I didn't end up in a tweet from the Washington State Patrol. Like, just pulled this car over going 91 and a 70.
That's the common sense bumper sticker.
Oh my gosh. I haven't put the common sense bumper sticker on my new car yet, so I've got to transition it over.
Yeah, that might have gotten you out of the ticket.
I know I should have had because on my old car I had my Dave Reichert bumper sticker and then my Common Sense 2024 bumper sticker. So maybe if I'd had them both, that would have been the winning combo. Anyway, no, it wasn't me going 161 miles an hour, but that guy got arrested or girl, I don't know, arrested for what do you call it? Reckless driving.
Reckless,
yeah. Which is crazy and good that they got arrested. Okay, let's see. Some questions and comments before we get to our closing sanity check, which has to do with Planet Fitness and their stocks plunging after they kicked a woman out who complained about a man in the locker room. All right, first two comments. Dano. I don't get this comment. Isn't it vote yes on the initiatives to pass? What is this about?
So that's why Matt's clarifying right under that. So
did we talk about the initiatives on the show today?
He's saying, how do I vote? He's saying, well, no, we were talking about voting at the beginning of the show and ballots. And he's like, remind me, do I vote yes or no on the initiatives? Because he's trying to,
yes on the initiatives.
It's not always clear.
Matt Gilbert says, you vote yes on the initiatives and vote no on any bonds or levies.
Right.
You know, Brian Haywood, Let's Go Washington, I think he came up with it. Good slogan for the initiatives. Ready? Vote yes, pay less. That's a winner.
Genius.
That's genius. That's a winner. So just remember that, Dano, if you forget. Vote yes, pay less.
They are often worded very confusing for people. So you never know, okay, if I'm voting yes, does that mean I'm not paying the tax? Or
yes.
So I get that it's confusing.
And one of the challenging things is people tend to default to no. If they don't understand something, they just reject it.
Yes.
And we can't have that. So it's, say it with me. Vote yes to pay less.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to come up with
tell your friends.
Tell your friends as well. Deanne Wade says, it's unfortunate that that WA chose this year when neither party is favored by most people to put the party choices on the outside of the envelope. Not checking spoke volumes. It wasn't because people couldn't follow the directions. Yeah, Ford 98270 says, I wrote in black Sharpie, none of your business, knowing that it would not be counted.
Hey, I mean, I know everybody's concerned in the conspiracy, but on the other hand, be proud. Be proud that for what you're voting for and who you're voting for.
At the same time, though, I disagree because I don't think you have to be proud of being a member of a party to want to vote.
No, not a member of the party. Yeah. I'm just saying, it doesn't have to be secretive. Now, I get the concern. I get all of the concern because of all of the conspiracies, but I don't know that this is effective. If your vote doesn't count, it's not an effective pushback.
No. And luckily, you don't have to do this for the elections that really, really do matter. So you don't have to do it again.
Yeah.
Sally S. says, were you just going to correct me and say all elections matter?
No. Well, no. Well, I mean, this one, yes, I get what you're saying. But yes, for the next primary, things like that, things will matter. All of these will matter.
Perhaps no election in our lifetimes in Washington State has mattered more. Sally S. says, my husband forgot to declare his party affiliation on his ballot. The county election office sent him a letter to cure his ballot, and they sent it back yesterday. Yeah, and chances are if you can cure your ballot, the elections officials have gotten in touch with you to try to do that. It's the same thing during a regular election when there's an issue with your signature or something. There's always a chance to fix it. Bill Biz with a $20 super chat. Jonathan Choe is an exceptional reporter. Wish we had more like him. I agree. Old Sub Sailor with a $20 super chat. I wish this podcast would trend nationally. So informative. That's so nice.
Yes,
Best
I wish
podcast
too.
out there. Keep up the great work. Brandi, Nicole, Dee, Jonathan Choe, and every other contributor. That's so nice. Thank you.
That's sweet.
Mandy said, I wonder when they're going to have pilot ratings so we know whether to get on the plane.
But they already do.
They have pilot ratings?
Well, not ratings, but they already have these DEI qualifications. Yes,
Right.
that is a thing. That there is a similar. They've lowered the standards in order to get more DEI, whatever.
Yeah, well, I think what she's saying is
It is
like,
scary.
let's get a rating for the pilot so I know whether I should get on the plane or whether they've had issues in the past. Y says you had to spend so this is on COVID and education. Y said you had to spend 4 years after COVID to confirm common sense. Seriously, I'm rolling my eyes a lot today. Soon my eyeballs will get stuck in the back of my head. I'm so glad that my kids were preschool aged and baby during the time and our private preschool decided to get back into the classroom when fall came. Yeah, it's really crazy. I mean, like with the masking stuff. Again, I'm going to get just the whole 6 months is generous. Giving them a 6-month, reprieve of the first 6 months, like do what you need to do.
But by fall.
But it was honestly like more like a month before my red pill before the red pill in front of me started to look really appetizing. Where I was like, okay. But some of that stuff is like, I don't need the government to tell me that what I already knew to be true. I don't need the internet. I don't need the New York Times putting on a mask for 5 minutes and then sitting there and eating a meal for an hour and a half without it. I knew that was stupid, right? Okay, Suzanne says, today's headlines are yesterday's conspiracies. Yep, that's why more and more, I'm like, I'm not dismissing that. As crazy as something sounds on the internet, I'm like, that could be true.
You never know.
Because too many conspiracies turn out to be true. Like the whole thing about the French president's wife maybe was born a man. I'm like, I'm not dismissing that. Because that could turn out to be true. Kate Middleton's like missing. I was like, I'm not dismissing that. That might turn out to be true. It doesn't matter what it is. Okay, Amber Monroe. How Dems handled COVID was never based on doing what was right. It was all about control. I believe that today, 100%. It was like, what can we get people to do? Rachel, and it turns out a lot. It turns out you can get people to do a lot. Rachel Cisneros, narcissists never admit they're wrong. Very true. D, I've gotten about 3 jabs and 3 boosters, and luckily... Is this RD?
Yes.
Oh my God. D says I've gotten about 3 jabs and 3 boosters, and luckily I've only gotten COVID 5 times. Safe and effective. For the record, I did not mandate the COVID vaccine for my employees.
No,
D got that on. I have a feeling I know why he got that, but
we know.
on his own accord. Totally. Yeah, you've only gotten COVID 5 times. Great.
I don't think he's told us about those 5 times when he's had COVID.
Yeah, I think I knew about one of them. But I don't need to know about everybody's. He doesn't work with us in the building, you know. He works from home. Okay, good questions. Oh, did I get to both the super chats? Yes, I did. Okay. Great questions and comments per the usual. We're going to get to our closing sanity check with Planet Fitness, maybe paying the price for going too far on the woke train. First, our friend Wes Jones, peaceful protester extraordinaire. If you didn't watch the show yesterday, did you see? So Wes Jones was on the show, not for an ad, but he attended that protest in Bellevue outside the home of that guy who's squatting in it. And Nicole labeled him Wes Jones, peaceful protester, which I thought was really cute. But anyway, Wes has been great coming on the show and talking about everything that's going on in the real estate landscape right now. We're waiting for the Fed to drop interest rates. Obviously, that's going to be a good time for home buyers after a really slow 2023. But even if the Fed doesn't drop interest rates in 2024, Wes says he still expects things to pick back up a little bit.
If they stay where they're at right now, I actually think that values will stay closer to where they're at. We'll see lower appreciation. We'll see appreciation, but it'll be modest. But if they start to come back down, well, that's when I think we'll start to see more of the multiple offer situations and the bid ups in home sale prices.
Yeah, so the very best thing you can do if you're thinking about selling your home, even if it's a few months out on the horizon, get it ready. Get it ready so when the market rebounds, you are ready to take advantage of it and your home hits the market day one. The first thing Wes Jones will do is give you a free market analysis so you can kind of set your expectations. You can also use their home value calculator just right there on their website, plug in your address, find out how much your home is worth. It might be worth more than you think, but they also offer some cool services like the Listing Boost Concierge service. If you need some cosmetic updates to your home, he'll come in. He'll help manage the contractors. They can even help pay for it up front, so it's stress-free for you. Sell with buywithwest.com, sellwithwest.com, a better way to sell your home. All right, Planet Fitness memberships and stocks are taking a dive after a woman was kicked out of a Planet Fitness for complaining about a man who was shaving in the woman's locker room. So obviously this combines all the transgender debate and some other aspects of behavior at gyms, which I could go on a whole rant about. But here's the woman explaining what happened. What, Nicole? Oh,
you didn't call for sanity check, so I wasn't
let's
on
talk
that
about it in our
screen.
closing sanity check. Sorry. I got ahead of myself.
I was
right.
thinking we got told that somebody listens to you in like 1.25 speed, and you
Yeah.
mentioned that you talk fast anyway, and I was thinking that during that I was like, wow,
Somebody
she's
told me
on.
because on your podcast you can listen to it like 1.25, 1.5, or 2 times the speed. Somebody said on the weekend they listened to me on 1.25, and I'm like, I already talk really fast, so you must have very quick comprehension. Anyway, here's the woman explaining what happened to her.
Good day. I just wanted to say I just came out of Planet Fitness, and there is a man shaving in a women's bathroom. I realize he wants to be a woman. He gets to be a woman. I love him in Christ. He's a spiritual being having a human experience. He doesn't like his gender, so he wants to be a woman. But I'm not comfortable with him shaving in my bathroom. All right. I just thought I'd say it out loud.
Yeah. So she said it out loud. And in case if you're watching on the show, here's the picture that she took of this guy who's in the woman's area. Now, look, I got to be honest, I feel the same way she feels. Like, I'm all for adults doing what makes them happy, but that doesn't mean that you have to be comfortable with it. It doesn't mean that, if you're in a locker room and you're a woman and you're used to walking around naked among other women, and then there's someone who is, transgender who wants to walk around as well, that you then have to be comfortable with it and that you can't complain about it or raise concerns about it. So anyway, Planet Fitness, and this is in Fairbanks, Alaska, they canceled this woman's membership. Now, to be fair, I think they canceled it because she took a photo. And you are not supposed to take photos in locker room areas. And that's to protect everyone. I don't want anyone taking photos in a locker room area where I might be naked. Although I don't usually walk around naked. I have some modesty and I have a podcast, so I'm not out there, flaunting my goods. But I think that's the rule she broke. And that's fair. You can't break the rules. Those rules are in place for a reason. But this is, again, it's similar to the landlord story that we discussed with Bellevue, with all these people showing up to try to shame this squatter into leaving. Is it the best course of action? Probably not. But it's like, what else do you do? What else are women supposed to do? No one listens to them. They call you a TERF if you push back against any of this stuff. You're not allowed to raise concerns. You just have to fall in line and deal with it, or find another gym if you can find one that doesn't have the same policies. So she took a picture of the guy and she posted it, and she's like, I have an issue with this. This is from Must Read Alaska. Stock plunges after Planet Fitness cancels membership of Fairbanks woman who objected to a man being in the women's locker room. So now Planet Fitness is seeing a little bit of blowback for this, which I think is appropriate. It's not cancel culture or anything like that. It's people deciding where they want to spend their money based on how a business operates. And Planet Fitness has first of all, it's gigantic, and it has a ton of members, so much so that I've heard it's very hard to find and keep a machine in a Planet Fitness. So maybe it's not the best experience to begin with, but it's a very cheap option for a gym. It's a low monthly membership. I mean, somebody tell me if I'm wrong, but I think it's like $20 a month or something for a Planet Fitness membership. So it appeals to a lot of people. But because of that, it appeals to people across the political spectrum who are going to have a wide range of opinions on this particular issue. And obviously the market is saying that people don't like it, that this woman ought to be able to raise concerns about having to be in a locker room area with a man, and that she shouldn't have her membership canceled. And what do you do? So this is where insanity gets us. Insanity gets us to the point where people are having to take things into their own hands. People aren't being heard. Just like in the Bellevue landlord case, people feel like, man, sanity is not being heard. Our voices of reasonable, law-abiding people are not being heard in this case, so we're going to take matters into our own hands. So now you have this woman who, I have no doubt that she raised concerns before she took a picture and went public with it. It's like, hey, I don't feel comfortable with this, but she doesn't get to have that opinion. She doesn't get to have that and voice it because it's wrong. And so then she takes matters into her own hands and puts this guy's picture all over the internet, which I don't particularly agree with, but I understand why you would get to the level of frustration that you would do that. So sanity has to come back so that people can deal with things in a regular, socially acceptable way. All right, that has been our sanity check for today, and that has been today's episode of Undivided. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. I appreciate every single one of you. If you've not signed up to support our show already, please do so. If you like the clips of the show, if you watch it live with us, whatever it is, it's just $5 a month. undividedpod.com, undividedpod.com. By becoming a subscriber, you are helping us to grow, and that is particularly important in this critical election year. We will see all of you back here on the live show tomorrow at noon.